Happy holidays. Happy holidays. Welcome, everybody, to the Christmas episode of the Cats and Bolts podcast, coming to you live from Podcast Junkie Studios. I'm one half of the show, Rod Peterson, the host, joined by the other half, Serena Taylor. And we're here on a very special Christmas edition, and we're going to, as usual, have a heck of a lot of fun here today, answer some viewer mail, talk about the things that we want to talk about, and just basically say, I hope you're having a good holiday season and you had a good Christmas. You see, I'm wearing my Florida Panthers Santa hat. I brought this thing home a couple of years ago from a Panthers game, and to be honest, Serena, I never thought there would ever be a time I would need or want to wear it. And here we are.
I'm not sure I've ever actually seen that.
Yeah.
When I saw it today, before we left the house, I was like, what? Where did that even come from?
I've had this thing tucked away for a couple of years. I guess intuition, knowing that one day we would do a Florida hockey podcast, and that's what we do here, talking about the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Florida Panthers. And before I get into some of this special, I've only got 7 topics written down, and we've only got 30 minutes to do the show. I feel like we probably will end up with 10. But I want to give a big shout out to my guy, Mark Gundry from the Whole Life Florida clothing brand. I had a knock at the door and had a package delivered, a polo and a golf shirt in Florida Panthers colors, because he knows we're big hockey people here in Florida. Mark Gundry, The Whole Life. Check out their website for their complete inventory of very fun clothing brand, whole-life.com. But he did the Panthers colors specifically for us. Okay, before we get to the World Juniors, I got to be honest, Serena, let's actually maybe start there. I'm going to jump to point 4. You were just all in a dither. We got to do World Juniors. We got to do World Juniors. It's like your thing. Explain why.
I think that it's most Canadians' thing. The World Juniors just runs so deep for every Canadian. It's our favorite tournament. It's in Canada every other year for a reason. That's where the people go. It's just something that's been a part of everyone's holiday tradition for the last 40 years. Yeah,
well, you've lived in the States a long time. I'm still figuring this out. What portion of our audience, because we've got a lot of Florida hockey fans that are watching, would pay attention, or Americans in general, to the World Juniors? Enlighten me.
I think there are a few more that are starting to catch on that the tournament actually exists, because we just call it the World Juniors. Technically, it's the U20 tournament.
Under 20, yeah.
Right. There's the under 18. There's all of those things that everybody has, but we call it the World Juniors. And it's not really something that a lot of Floridians would probably pay attention to, or anybody really in the U.S., because they don't have a lot of kids from here that play college hockey or play. It's just not a deep connection to their kids playing around here, so they wouldn't really be following it in the first place. Mm-hmm. And even if they, whatever country they play for, it's just not something that is deep like that. Whereas in Canada, even if I'm from a town of 100 people, there's a kid that will play on the World Junior team or be trying out or playing in the Western Hockey League. So,
well, I tell you what, what's fun about this is Bill Lindsay, whom we had on last week. When hockey started in Florida 30 years ago, there was only 3,000 kids playing hockey in this state. Now there are 30,000. One day my goal will be for the World Juniors to be here, and I think that would be fantastic. Maybe talk about that a little later in the show. We've discussed it before. My number one point is viewer mail. If we want to get the shot of both of us, or at least I want Serena's reaction to this. Last week, I lobbed you the hot potato. There's no annoyed comments at anything you've said. So they're either used to you or they're just not going to watch anymore. I have a sense that they're not going to change you. You don't care.
No, I mean, I don't know what you want me to say. No. It doesn't.
The only viewer mail that I've had is positive, is my point. So I kind of thought we'd do a thing. I'll just lob Serena the live comments on the air. We won't talk about them between shows. And this one was people wrote in and said how much they loved the show. They said, you two are the best, which we kind of think so. But they said, you guys know what you're talking about, was 1. And 2, love your Canadian accents. Ben, do we have Canadian accents?
I think
producer Ben back there.
I don't know. I mean,
I don't think so.
Maybe some words, but nothing like.
I can definitely hear Rod's. I can hear Rod's, but
give me an example of one word I would say that
you say, like some of the ways that you say house, or you still have a little bit of like at the house. Yeah, there's certain things. Sorry. Because There you go.
That was good.
Yeah.
That was good.
It's just
That was not meant.
right. That's the whole
No.
point. It wasn't intentional,
know.
but Americans say sorry and Canadians say sorry. And I'm like, well, there is an O in it, but it's just, I've lived in the US since 2007 and I've lived all over. So I've kind of lost a lot of the way I say different things. So, I mean, I kind of have a little bit of an accent, but not as much. Like when I talk to people back in Canada, they feel like I have an American accent.
Yeah, I get it. I just felt that I speak with no accent whatsoever. But I will say this: people make so much joke about a boot, and I was in a 12-step meeting. I never told you, just within the last year. And there's a girl there from Ontario. The meeting was here, and she's like, "About," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"No, you're the kind of person they make fun of." But anyways, whatever.
Ontarians talk like that.
Ontarians
though.
do.
So do Michigan people. They speak Michiganese.
Right.
They have that same like hat, bag, Canada. That's how like people from Ontario. But also too, Americans are quick to make fun of Canadians. You ever heard someone from Minnesota talk? They talk just like they're from Saskatchewan or Manitoba.
They're honorary Canadians.
Yeah.
People from Minnesota.
They're pretty
that's what
close.
I've learned. So, anyways, I thank all the positive comments. Those are the ones I lobbed at you that you didn't know were coming, and they're all nice. People are enjoying the show, and that's the main thing. She's never, probably ever going to like Matthew Tkachuk, and I think people have gotten over that. Now,
Well, it's like, I don't care. It's like, you're not going to like every player. So what? I'm not a Panthers fan. I'm not a Tkachuk
was there
fan.
ever an Edmonton Oiler besides Darnell Nurse that you don't like?
Yeah. Hemsky got under my nerves
Okay.
bad.
Alish
Hemsky got under
Okay.
my nerves.
Because basically the people here are saying, how can you do a Panthers show and not like Matthew Tkachuk? And the point is, number one, that's Serena. And number two, get over it.
Yeah, I mean, I get that they wouldn't understand. These are not hockey people. I've said for a long time, and don't take offense to this, but if the shoe fits, lace that bitch up. Just because you're a Panthers fan or you're an NHL fan or you're a Oilers fan or you're whatever does not make you a hockey person. Let's be very clear. There's a big difference between NHL fans and hockey fans. And I learned that when I moved to the US. You and I could go anywhere in Saskatchewan and go pick a rink and go to a hockey game. Just like you told me there was one night there was like 400 and some high school football games in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
That's what hockey's like in Canada. We don't pretend to be football people. It's okay.
Yeah,
It's
well,
fine.
I would equate it this way before we get on to a more fun
Were you
topic.
going to ring that bell?
I am going to.
Okay.
I'm a Blue Jays fan, but I'm not necessarily a baseball fan. I'm not going to watch the
Yeah.
Padres and Rockies on a Tuesday.
Yeah, you're
I'm
not
a
a-
Raptors fan, but I'm not a basketball fan. You don't see me clamoring to go to Heat games here.
Yeah, I don't. You're
So
not.
that's the
yeah.
difference.
Like I love baseball. I could watch baseball all day, every day.
Yeah, you're a baseball fan.
Yeah, I'm a
Yeah.
baseball fan, but I'm not a basketball fan. I don't even pretend to be a Raptors fan. I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get invested in it just because they were in the finals or whatever. It's just not my thing.
So the reason I was kind of saving this for this episode, because trust me, we will get around to the World Juniors, but Serena has some very spicy thoughts on the ouster of Don Cherry. And that's why I'm ringing the bell, because I'm like, listen up, everybody. Ben and Kristen, do you guys know who these bobbleheads are on the desk? I gotta ask. Do you know Don Cherry and Ron McLean?
I would suspect not.
I don't think I do.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
so that's the other. These are the two iconic. Let me show Serena again if you don't mind. There you go. Iconic hockey night in Canada. The 60, 70-year tradition on CBC every Saturday night. These guys hosted Don Cherry's Coach's Corner in the first intermission, analyzing the game, the NHL, and hockey. I'm a fan of Don Cherry and Ron McLean too. And I think he came on the air around 83, 84, Serena. You don't know life without Don Cherry. Really.
Hockey Night in Canada started 100 years ago on the radio, on CBC radio. It was very old. Then when it transformed to television, Coach's Corner was on the air for 40 years. And people, no matter what they were doing on a Saturday night in Canada, stopped at 7:50 to watch Coach's Corner.
Okay, I
or
want to
whatever
stop
time.
for a sec because I was doing my TV talk show that I do every day in Canada, and I had Jamie McCowan on the air with me, two-time Stanley Cup champion. We were talking about these two guys, Don Cherry and Ron McLean. McCowan goes, when we were on the road as an NHL player, if we were in the bar on a Saturday night that was off, the whole bar would stop. Shut up, everybody. turn up the sound to hear what Don Cherry had to say. I
Yeah.
don't know who would. John Madden? And Don Cherry, by the way, did coach the Boston Bruins. He was the NHL Coach of the Year in like 78, 79, 80. You would know better than me. So anyways, there's the background. He's the John Madden of the NHL.
Yeah, that's probably a very good comparison. And it's like anytime I worked in a restaurant, we would turn the volume up when Coach's Corner came on. It was an 8.5-minute segment of grapes.
Everybody wanted to know what Don Cherry had to say. It was like the sermon of the week. And then he was fired in, I want to say, October of 2019. And the only, why are you bringing it up today, Rod? Because a guy in Regina, Saskatchewan sent me that bobblehead. It just showed up on our doorstep this week because he knows that I love bobbleheads, clearly. And I'm like, ooh, this might trigger Serena.
Well,
let's explain why.
I'm not sure how deep you want to go with this.
As deep as you want to go.
Well, for those of you who are unfamiliar, Don Cherry was terminated because of something he said referring to people who did not wear poppies. In Canada, for Remembrance Day, November 11th, everybody wears a poppy. It's just a thing. If you don't wear a poppy, what kind of person are you?
To remember the war dead.
Correct. So Don Cherry, also known as Grapes, went on the air and referred on Coach's Corner to the people who don't wear poppies as you people need to respect this country and whatever. And of course, one person complained about it and it was blown completely out of proportion. He was subsequently terminated, saying he was referring to you people as people of a different race, different country, whatever the case. And it was completely unjust. I mean, he said things on the air before that he probably could have realistically been terminated
right
for.
Now? In today's day and age, he
Oh, yeah,
wouldn't have
he'd have been
lasted a day.
Yeah, people are just terribly soft. And that started the whole thing. And I will never forget reading it and bursting into tears. And I called my dad and I was crying. I'm like, they fired him. And I knew watching Coach's Corner, he's going to get in trouble. My dad goes, he's going to be in big trouble for that. I said, that's ridiculous. Is that real? But I don't live in Canada anymore. I didn't realize how soft it's gotten. It's gotten bad. And it's just one of those things that was this slippery slope. And a guy from my gym played hockey at Notre Dame College in Wilcox. He's from New Hampshire, so he's familiar with Saskatchewan. He loves Saskatchewan. And he said to me, I'll never forget it. He came up to me after Grapes got fired. He's like, what the hell? I go, bro, I don't even know. I don't understand. I'm trying to process this. And he goes, you know what my dad said to me? He goes, if Don Cherry got fired and there's that many Canadians that are upset about it, the guy who fired him is in the wrong. If you can upset that many Canadians, you are in the wrong.
Cherry, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
It was, I don't know one person that was like, yeah, he deserved it. I literally don't know one person.
She's pretty good at recounting facts. I agree with most of what she said. The difference is on the month. This happened on a Saturday night because they aired every Saturday night, right? Well, by Monday morning, he had the opportunity to walk it back and apologize. And he would have been able to keep his job. And he's like, yeah, we're good.
Dude, if you're in your 80s, he's like 82 years old.
4 years ago, yeah. 4.5 years ago.
There's no chance he didn't do anything wrong. I would never apologize if I didn't do something wrong. And technically, if you're going to terminate somebody, it has to be proven to be sexual, it has to be discriminative, it has to be falling under a category of things. And it did not. So the termination, in my opinion, was unjust.
Yeah, well, what's right and what happens are two different things usually. And I will, as we get ready to move on, I'll just say the thing that bothers me the most was that the huge part of he played in our childhoods and our lives. Because my mom, he was the ultimate businessman. He had a chain of restaurants. He had clothing. I had the latest Don Cherry tie every year. He wrote books. He had the videos, right? He was everything. And for now, if you watch a Hockey Night in Canada broadcast, you don't even know he was ever on the air.
It's a crime.
And that's brutal.
About 15 years ago, the Canadian government, I'm not sure if you remember this, it was right before I moved to the U.S. The Canadian government did this thing where they took about 6 months or a year and they were like, call this number, leave a voice message, vote for your favorite Canadian, who you think should be the number one Canadian of all time. A number one Canadian of all time, Don Cherry was number 6. Of all the Canadians in the history of Canada, you want to know who was number 4?
Wayne Gretzky.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, and we can't, while we're sitting here, we have to just finish up the story because there will never be, I don't think, another day that we'll talk about it on Cats and Bolts, is his partner there, Ron MacLean, who I back. He's still on Hockey Night in Canada. And I don't know where if you and I have ever talked about that. Ron MacLean is a lightning rod in Canada for not standing behind Don Cherry and not what? I have a personal problem with that because I went through a similar sort of thing at the end of my play-by-play career, or similar to it. My color guy got fired, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Quit? What's Ron MacLean supposed to do? Quit? The old man, forgive me for saying, had the chance to apologize and didn't. What's Ron supposed to do?
I think we have talked about this on your show and on other things. Anybody who, and this is still years later, people are still upset with Ron MacLean because Canadians have to blame somebody. They have to blame somebody and get pissed off.
Something.
Right. God forbid if we moved on from something. But they're still upset with him. This is his job. This is like Ron MacLean is the host of Hockey Night in Canada and will always be the host. Like he is the best at what he does. It would be ridiculous if he stepped down. Anybody who thinks that he should have taken that on the chin because of something his partner said.
Idiots.
Come on.
And they won't get over it. So as we... we're just past the halfway mark, believe it or not, of this show. And we're going to have we have guests showing up here before long. But I'll just say this before we get into that World Junior thing. Favorite U.S. TV NHL broadcasters as we sit here. Do you have any that come to mind? Because I'll just leave it there. We watch the games.
Like as far as the teams, you mean?
Yeah. Who do you like on the U.S. broadcast, whether it's TNT, who all airs, ESPN, obviously, TBS? Who do you like? Local guys, national guys?
I've always liked Randy Moeller. He is probably my favorite color guy outside of Canada because there are obviously the majority of color commentators for the teams, for the whatever, they're all Canadian because they know the game. Play-by-play guys are a mix of both, whatever. I love Dave Randorf in Tampa. I was so happy to hear that he went to Tampa. But
there you go, Bolts fans.
Randy is, before I even knew who Randy was, I would listen to the games. I'm like, I don't know. This guy is honest and he's funny and he's direct and he knows the game. And then when I realized it was Randy Moeller, like when I first moved here, you don't show the names. You don't know, right?
Oh, sorry, I thought you were talking about Randorf.
No.
You mentioned them both.
Yeah, follow along, Roddy.
You started with Moeller, and then you went to Randorf, and then you've gone back to Moeller.
Yeah, which I said, as far as Randy Moeller's concerned, when I first moved here, I really just liked him. He was funny. But when it comes to play-by-play, it would be Randorf, if I have to pick in the U.S.
Okay. By the way, before we move on, the NFL season's going strong, folks, and DraftKings Sportsbook is hooking new customers up with an offer that's even stronger. Bet $5 on any game this week to score $200 instantly in bonus bets. And DraftKings isn't stopping there. All customers can take advantage of a sweetener offer every game this month. Get in on the game day greatness. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the promo code THPN. It's on your screen. It stands for the Hockey Podcast Network, of which we're a part. New customers can score $200 instantly in bonus bets when you bet $5 on the NFL. That's code THPN only on DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the National Football League. The crown is yours. A gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. And we're also brought to you in part by the Beach House Pompano, scenic rooftop restaurant on the shores of Pompano Beach, and Boresco, a tropical outpost serving only the freshest tacos and lush jungle vibes, 225 North Pompano Beach Boulevard. Guests of the Cats and Bolts podcast receive gift cards to the Beach House and Boresco. So to the World Juniors preview, I'm interested to know what you have to say about it. We've attended these in the past. I've broadcasted in the past. I was the voice of Team Canada 2012 on the Sportsnet radio network across Canada. It's fun, but I don't know a whole lot about the teams this year. You do?
Yeah, there's some really good returning players and a lot of players that are coming back. Each team in the juniors this year has a really good player that stands out on their team. And even if you look at Czechia, they've got Yuri Kulich, who's been playing incredible. He's going to be a top player for the Czechs. The U.S. has a couple guys coming back. The Americans are not big. They're not going to be a big team. They've got Cutter Gauthier, who's I think like 6'2" or 6'3". He's going to be the biggest player on that team, probably by far. But that doesn't mean anything. The juniors are always an interesting tournament because you can't fight in IIHF hockey. So sometimes it doesn't matter. Obviously, having a player who's a bigger player is going to make a big difference. But the U.S. also has Will Smith, who was drafted 4th overall this year, I think.
When did you do all this research?
I like to watch the shows. I like to figure out what's going on. Like once the schedule comes out, I start kind of looking at the schedule. And then once the rosters are released, I like to look at the rosters on each team. I know it's kind of nerdy, but I just love doing it. It's interesting to me because the teams are never the same from year to year. They're always different.
I knew you loved it. I didn't know you loved it this much.
No, I love it. There's going to be a lot of good players out there. I've seen just what I love so much is watching the players that played at the World Juniors and then have made their way through the NHL. I mean, that is such a big tournament. You know, it's like Jaromir Jagr and even Wayne obviously played at the World Juniors and as a 16-year-old.
Well, yeah, and I feel like, well, two things. One, the Canadian viewers right now are loving the discussion. The American viewers are hopefully learning a little bit if they didn't know before of what this is all about. But it's two different things. We all grew up watching it around the tournament's always Christmas and New Year's, right? It runs for 2 weeks and usually begins Boxing Day. But when I broadcast it, you did more preparation. This probably doesn't surprise you for this than I did broadcasting the event. I showed up. My color commentator was Sam Cosentino, and he wanted to meet the night before our first broadcast, Finland versus Canada. And I said, what are we going to meet about, Sammy? You're the color guy.
We're going to meet about this.
well, what you're talking about, yeah. I'm like, I don't need to know that. I'll go watch warm-up, and then I'll know who the names are. But you've known me a long time. That's me. Sammy wanted to have all the background. Well, that's what he does. So at breakfast that morning of the first game, Finland versus Canada, I remember Joel Armia, I was calling him Armia, was on Finland for us. Brendan Gallagher, Brett Connolly. There was some big, Jonathan Huberdeau was on the team. I walked over to Al Murray, the head scout for Tampa Bay. We were in the Westin Edmonton restaurant. And I said, Al, can you just tell me how to say these names?
Yeah.
And he told me, he gave me everything that I needed to know. And then I went to the rink and I watched warm-up. And listen, Serena, you're a broadcaster. Imagine walking in and having to call Russia, Sweden, Czech Republic, Finland.
The Finns would be tough.
They were the toughest. And for Russia, it was Kucherov was the big one for sure. And that, we still talk about these tournaments and so forth. Now, having said that, the other fun part about these discussions is when did the World Juniors first come on your radar? And we've asked our guests on this, Rod Peterson showed this, but I've never asked you, what's your earliest recollection?
I don't know.
There must be something that stands out.
I don't remember when I started watching. It was like, when did I start watching Grapes and Hockey Night in Canada? I don't remember. It just happened. Probably my first favorite memory is when John Slaney scored for Canada to win. But there's just so I don't remember, like that might have been the first one. I'm not really sure.
There's no wrong answers to this, but for the hockey people and fans that are watching right now, she mentioned Craig Button, or you mentioned Gretzky scoring in '76.
Yeah.
Craig Button is the TSN's director of scouting, Canada's ESPN, and he was the former assistant general manager of the Dallas Stars, general manager of the Calgary Flames. He was on my show, and with our World Junior talk there, I said, what's your first memory? And he goes, watching Wayne Gretzky score in the Montreal Forum, 1976. He goes, I was in the crowd with my dad. We were season ticket holders for the Canadians. So that's the kind of impact that the tournament has. And mine was, to be honest, that I really remember was 1987 and the brawl, where, interestingly enough, Don Cherry was on the panel when there was a brawl in Piastany, Slovakia. Canada versus Russia. And my good friend Theron Fleury was in that brawl, and we just talked about it this week. Not only was it 20-on-20 and they're brawling, some genius decided to turn the lights out in the rink. Like that was going to stop the fighting. It just made it worse. So I said to Theo, what do you remember about that? Theo goes, what I remember is they turned the lights out and the refs left. They left. They went back to the dressing room. He goes, it got worse. So they called it the punch up in Piastany. And now we've talked about Ron MacLean and his relationship with Don. I'll always back Ron MacLean because I've been in his shoes with your partner going down, A, and B, he's been on my show multiple times. I believe he's a good guy. he wasn't hosting the broadcast that day. It was Brian Williams. I'm Brian Williams.
Who's a stud.
He's a stud too, but that day, listen, everybody, they're brawling. Think about it again. It's like a scene from Slapshot. The lights all go out. They don't know what to do, so they throw it back to the panel in Toronto, Don Cherry and Brian Williams. And here's Brian Williams. He didn't know what to say. He'd never seen anything like that. He called it a disgrace. Canada should be banned forever. He's calling out the players by name. And even Theo said this week, Grapes was like, no, calm down.
Well, I think it's funny what we were just talking about, how there's actually not supposed to be fighting in the IHF. So at the time, the World Junior Tournament was a round robin, and whoever won the most games won the tournament. And it was like you had 8 teams, you played all these games, boom, you won, you're done. Now it's a format, it's a pool format. So back then, Canada and Russia both got disqualified because of that fight, and so they were out of the tournament. Understandably so. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say we weren't at fault, but you know exactly what was coming. The Russians had automatically been disqualified. The Russians were in no position to win that tournament, and they knew it. That's why the round robin thing was not good. Canada still had a crack at winning the tournament. So the Russians did what they were going to do to take us out.
Yeah, well, and my favorite part about all of this is, because that was the first time I would have been 14, to be honest with you. And the World Juniors was just kind of really become, back then it was just a hockey tournament. Now it's got Stanley Cup final ratings, but it wasn't like that then.
I think it launched. It launched it.
Yeah.
I would suspect there is probably more Canadians that watch the World Juniors than there are hockey night, like Stanley Cup finals.
The ratings would tell you that. They rival. They're about the same. But Theron Fleury said to me this week, he goes, everybody calls me this time of year and wants to talk about that brawl. I don't want to talk about it. He goes, because it's you, I'll talk to you about it. Because I'd rather talk about the next year, 1988. We won the whole thing. Nobody ever talks about that.
And
which
it
is
was
funny.
89, I think, that Slaney scored that goal
there you go.
to win. So I think that's kind of the time where it started really taking off for Canadians. Because after that brawl, things changed a lot with the World Juniors.
Yeah, well, I think it's funny why Theo wouldn't want to talk about it, but that's his thing.
Sick of it.
Yeah, and he's maybe not proud of it. You know,
if all the things he's done that he's not proud of, that's probably the last.
They really slaughtered the Russians that day, literally and physically, or figuratively. But I just, walking it back as we call ourselves, a Florida hockey podcast. I did look at the names of those tournaments in the 80s. It wasn't just a who's who of Canadian players. And by the way, Shanahan was on that 87 team with Theo.
Yeah,
just to point out.
There's a lot of good players on that team.
But the next year in 88, for Team USA, Mike Modano, Jeremy Roenick, who I know you don't like, and I'm not like the biggest fan. He was a hell of a hockey player, though. No two ways about that. Right? Like basically every great Canadian player went through this tournament, but also so did every country's best players. Very rare that any didn't not play. Right?
I remember watching when Bobby Holik was playing at the World Juniors. And I remember the announcers calling him Bobby Holick because they had no idea, because that's, as a broadcaster, it's tough. You're trying to get the names of these players from people that don't speak English. Like, just say it how you would say it. Go down this list of people. And it was Robert Holick. I remember that specifically. And then fast forward, he becomes Bobby Holik and turns into a great player in the NHL.
Well, and we should just, one last thing, because we only have a couple minutes left, but summer of 2022, the tournament was moved into the summer because of because of COVID. The winter tournament, which would have been this time of year, was moved to the summer, and we were there. And I mean, I've known Serena a long time. I know that she's a pepper pot, but we were sitting next to the Team Finland staff. You might want to put the camera on her, Ben. I thought we were going to get in a fight.
Hold on.
Not me and her. We were going to be fighting them.
First of all, Mikko Mäkelä was sitting there for Finland.
Yes.
And I don't know. I don't really remember what happened. As much as Rod likes to romanticize everything, he actually does tell this story pretty well. So I don't really remember specifically what cracked you up.
Now you get foggy on the details. Yeah, we were sitting in a suite-ish.
Well, it was
a private
overlooking,
area.
Yeah.
And they were in the next one. Team Finland.
No, they were sitting in the same one as us, just down the chairs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't embarrassing. I don't really want to remember it. So I'm trying to remember. There
dramatic.
was a bad penalty taken, right? And they were all laughing or something amongst each other.
Yeah.
And then Canada scored on the power play, and you stood up and you're like, ha! And you were like yelling at them and almost like rubbing it in their face. And I'm like, Serena, Dawn, you're going to get our asses kicked.
Again,
here.
it was not that dramatic. It was not.
Well, I thought you didn't remember.
I was like, no, now I remember. You sparked my memory. And I turned and said, is it funny now? That's what I said. They were laughing at us for taking a crap penalty.
That's what it was.
I was like, funny now? Are you laughing now? Yeah, eat it.
It was Team
Whatever it was.
Finland, not a couple of schlubs on the street in Section 302.
Well, you're sitting in Canada, and what do you think is going to happen?
So we moved for the next game.
We did not.
Anyways,
they moved.
The rest of our topics we'll push to another time. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas, Serena. Thank you.
Thank you.
And to Christian and Ben and all our wonderful viewers and listeners every week. We love you. Thanks for the support, and we will see you in 2024. See you next year here on Cats and Bolts.